Welcome to On Point by Target River, the podcast where strategy meets execution with a little fun. I'm your host, Brian, and each episode will break down what actually works in marketing, sales, and growth so you can stay sharp, focused, and always on point. Let's dive in. What starts at 10 p.m. on a Friday night in Tacoma, Washington, includes Vancouver, British Columbia, and requires you to be back on Saturday night at 6 p.m. in Tacoma, Washington. Well, this dates back to a time in college when a friend of mine, Leaf, and we decided that we needed a new adventure on a Friday night. Nothing was happening on campus. There were no parties going on at the fraternity house. We decided to head to Denny's for our Grand Slam. And along the way, we realized, do we really need another Grand Slam? Why don't we instead head to British Columbia? Neither of us had been there yet. And so at about 10 o'clock that night, we went to the ATM, pulled out some cash, and got on the road. Now, the thing we hadn't really thought about yet was the fact that we needed to be back the next night at 6 p.m. to go to a sorority dance with some young ladies that had invited us. So we hadn't really thought about the deadlines and timelines that were going to go on there. So we ventured off. The night drive, the clock is ticking as we head north towards the Canadian border. Well, this is before the new heightened restrictions that we see as we across the different border crossings between the U.S. and Canada and Mexico and stuff. So we finally arrived there at the border between the U.S. and Canada well into the middle of the night. Darkness had set in. Thankfully, the border crossing wasn't too difficult, but we hadn't factored our time for fuel, let alone fatigue. So we arrived in the middle of the night and simply looked at each other and said, well, now what that we're here? So we found a hotel, crashed for a few hours, and then decided, okay, what little adventure or two can we have before we have to head back on the road down to Tacoma, Washington? So one of the things that was in our back of our mind constantly was, what will be the cause and effect of us doing this next thing, and how will it impact our ability to get back? Could we allow for any detours or sightseeing or any distractions if you were? So as we tooled around Vancouver, BC, we decided to visit the campus of University of British Columbia and see some fraternity brothers at that university. And then we realized we had to get a little sharp here because our time was starting to run out. We hadn't factored that old thing called traffic, having no idea what we might run into as we headed back through Seattle down to Tacoma. So the constraints that we were dealing with were actually starting to cause us to really hone in and focus on our judgment and the decisions. So we had to make some faster decisions. We had to be less wasteful of our time. And we had to stay aligned with our common goal of not disappointing our dates and getting back in time for that sorority function. So the deadline actually wasn't limiting to us. It was a bit clarifying. It became a new part of our adventure. So as we think about this and the parallels it might have to marketing, urgency can often create focus for us. As we think about a marketing parallel, urgency often creates focus. At Target River, for instance, enrollment deadlines for our school clients might be pending. We might have ballots dropping for elected officials who are hoping to get elected for the first time or reelected. Legislative windows might be opening up. We might have fundraising campaigns for nonprofits that have fiscal deadlines or year-end deadlines that we need to be mindful of. When timing is real, things start to tighten up in a positive way. Messaging might tighten. Teams start to align around a common goal to get things done on time, accurately, and effectively. And priorities are often simplified. Without urgency, we can often have projects that go adrift. We can have language that bloats within the campaign. Decisions can even be stalled because we think we've got plenty of time. A clear deadline forces us to have clear thinking as well. The discipline of execution for us to get back in time wasn't just about reckless speed, because there's that old thing called the Washington State Patrol that we had to be mindful of. It was about intentional pacing, shared clarity, and a common goal, and continuous communication between the two of us so we could have those appropriate bathroom breaks and gas stops. In marketing, similarly, deadlines force alignment. Alignment reduces friction, and friction slows outcomes. So we've got to be careful of those things. As we headed back that day on that Saturday, it turned to a bit of adventure as we saw the clock ticking. This was back before cell phones, so our dates had no idea that we were on this adventure to Canada at the time, and just assumed we were going to be arriving at 6 o'clock to pick them up on their sorority house to head out to the function that evening. The clock was ticking. We were driving my friend's Pontiac, and we came upon a motorcycle who decided to race us for about 100 miles down Interstate 5. Probably not the smartest thing in hindsight, but we kept pace with him, he kept pace with us, and it helped us arrive on time. When teams know that they have an exact objective, just like we do, it helps us come up with an exact timeline and an ability to move differently. Because when the clock is real, clarity becomes non-negotiable and missing deadlines becomes non-negotiable. Sometimes you don't need more resources when it comes to accomplishing things. You simply need a clearer finish line. Thanks for listening to On Point by Target River. If you're ready to grow your organization with real strategy that generates meaningful results, visit targetriver.com and connect with our team today. Stay focused, stay winning, and stay on point. We'll see you next time.